Hello, today I came here to have a conversation with you about a topic that, at least for me, seems quite unsettling. Should we, or can we change? In other words, is there a possibility for us to become better, more human, closer to a human ideal than we are today? The answer, generally speaking, in society and in everyday life, is no, even though someone might. If I ask this question directly, pause to reflect and intellectualize a bit, maybe someone would even say yes, but in practice, when we meet someone, for example, who is hot-tempered, we tend to think they'll be hot-tempered for the rest of their life, they'll be difficult forever. When we meet someone who is lazy or someone who is emotionally unstable, we think the same thing, they'll be like this their whole life. This is completely embedded within our worldview. It's incredible. It's important for us to realize that what we internalize as truth will influence those who also believe it to be true. And it ends up limiting people, taking away their opportunities for growth and improvement. Therefore, it's one of those things we should think 1,000 times about before doing. Because we create stereotypes and will fit people into them. So, we say, that person is just like that. We don't allow people to change. We don't believe they have that potential. And when we don't believe in them, we make it harder for them to believe in themselves. We make their path much more difficult than it needs to be, especially if they lack that support from the outside. So, it's important for us to reflect on this, to examine the foundation of our belief that human beings cannot change. We came into this world to grow. That is one of the principles I always hold. We didn't come into this world just for a stroll. We didn't come into this world simply to enjoy life. We came to grow as human beings. To leave this world greater than when we arrived, as I often say. To make a difference in someone else's life, in our own lives, in the world, even if just a little. In other words, we do not live in vain. We came to add value to the world. To speak our sacred word, to deliver our message. Well, see the world, then, precisely to leave it greater than when we arrived, that is, for growth. And growth involves change, sometimes very deep changes. They are not only possible, but also desirable. We must pursue them. That is the meaning of life. So, we must seek out every means that helps us become aware of the pressures that exist. Pressures upon us, working against us, and counterbalance them with an active will that we can sustain over time, so that we may sculpt ourselves. To realize that nothing within us is final. Absolutely nothing. Do not see your flaws as a part of who you are, but rather as temporary adornments that you can let go of. And gradually build that self-confidence which truly allows you to change. Which allows you to become the human being you dream of, the human being you would like to meet, to live alongside, the human being who represents an ideal for you. So, many times, we also carry a somewhat religious notion that there is a preordained destiny, that our fate is already written. As if human beings were puppets in the hands of a predetermined script that was written at the beginning. Or as if we were running a specific software that we simply execute and follow. In truth, this goes against the most basic logical understandings of life. If we stop to think logically, if we'll see this world to grow, it means that my options, my choices, must align with this idea of growth. When I have the ability to choose, when I have countless options and am free to choose, and I choose the best one, then that choice has merit. For example, if I find a lost wallet somewhere, I have 1,000 possible choices regarding what to do with it. There's even that somewhat cynical popular saying that goes, finders keepers, right? You have 1,000 possibilities for what to do with it. You choose to return it to the owner without touching its contents. That choice, then, is a merit. That choice reflects virtue, it reflects growth. Now, if someone sees you find the wallet, and that observer says, look, If you don't return it to the owner, they'll report you. By returning it to the owner under those circumstances, your decision holds no merit because you didn't choose freely, you were forced, you were coerced, and therefore there is no virtue in that decision. In order for us to have virtues, we must have the freedom to choose. And only by cultivating virtues can we truly grow. Therefore, if free will did not exist, we would be frozen in life. We wouldn't move forward because no choice would truly be our own. We would be conditioned by this predetermined fate, and thus there would be no possibility for human transformation. If at any point in your life you have overcome a small flaw, managed to rise above a negative tendency, then you know that change is possible. Therefore, do not believe those who tell you that you are bound by a story written in the past. Your story is being written by you right now. We are not frozen in place. We are beings under construction. We can become better than we are. And this is part of the very logic of our lives. We came here, let me emphasize, to leave greater than when we arrived. So be cautious with these ideas of predestination, of a fate already written. Things don't work that way. What else? Then come the circumstantial determinisms, family, culture, and so on. Everything that was done to us. But, as is often said, with great wisdom, we are not the things that were done to us, we are what we do with the things that were done to us. In other words, sometimes within a family, all the children receive the same upbringing, and yet one of them turns out completely different because they chose to be different. Sometimes we live in a culture that leans us towards certain habits, towards certain roles, and yet there are people who choose to go entirely in another direction. Why is that? Because we have the freedom to do so. We are capable of doing so. It's not about wanting to go against the majority. That's not the point. It's about choosing to stand for your ideal, your goal, choosing to reach the place you've dreamed of reaching. If the crowd is heading toward that ideal, great, I'll go with them. If they're not, they'll go alone. But I won't give up my ideal just to follow the crowd out of loneliness or fear of being an exception or anything like that. So, that's the point. Determinants don't have to be so determining after all. If we truly want to, and that is the key ingredient, we can counterbalance all these forces that try to shape us, the data, the environments we live in, the culture we are immersed in. Through our will, we can choose to take a completely different path, in another direction. It's very important for us to recognize this in history, how many individuals have done exactly that. If even a single person has managed to do this, it proves that it is indeed possible within the human condition. We can do it. There's still another thing that, as we mentioned earlier, gets in our way. And that is precisely the image that others build of us. The so-called stereotype. Oh, you're someone who's always late. And you even feel awkward about being on time because you know there will be jokes, you know there will be mockery. You feel pressured to fit into that role that was created for you. Why is that? Because everyone already has expectations about you. Everyone has labeled you, given you a nickname, and you feel pressured to stay in that place. You become trapped, enslaved by it. Free yourself from those things. It's up to others to decide what they want to do with their nicknames and stereotypes. I'll follow my own path, and I won't always be the same. I will always be just a little better than I was before. I will always be smoothing out the sharpest edges of my flaws. I won't stay in the same place just to please others. There's no reason to do that. I have no obligation to it. Each person should readjust their view of the world as needed. Another point is the historical moment we're living in, where the trend is not to seek our true selves, who we really are. We are shaped within an educational system to fit the social mask onto our faces. That socially accepted mask of the person who is simply focused on making money, seeking comfort, raising children to make money and seek comfort, and nothing more. In other words, that endless cycle of pursuing a comfortable and pleasurable survival, and nothing beyond that. That mask they're trying to force onto your face, you're not obligated to accept it either. You too, if you have enough courage for it, and let's see. This question of courage, if you have enough courage for it, you can reject that mask and seek your true face. Plato said that courage is the ability to maintain the rule of reason in extreme situations of fear and desire. Society corrupts us in this way, or it frightens us. If you're not like everyone else, you'll be lonely, you'll be seen as strange, you'll be rejected, or it buys us off with desires. If you do what everyone else does, you'll have many friends, you'll be very happy, you'll belong to many groups. In other words, it tries to seduce us through this equation of animal consciousness, fear and desire. We can have the courage to neither desire nor fear anything that society offers us. And above all, to fear not finding our own face throughout life. To fear ending life as strangers to ourselves. That, indeed, is something worthy of fear. In other words, we can even reconstruct what we fear and even what we desire. We don't need to follow society's script. We don't need to wear that mask. As I mentioned to you, the aspect of education is also a critical element because we are not truly formed, we are simply informed. We don't receive that formation in values, in virtues, that could make us more humanly capable of responding to life. We receive a technical, competitive education designed to place us in the job market and achieve success. And that's all. We are trained to acquire technical skills. Skills superior to others, so that we can rise above them and achieve success at the expense of someone else's failure. That is what we are trained for, informed about, because that is not truly an education. So, there remains a void, a formative education that our educational system does not provide. You are capable of giving it to yourself. You are capable of shaping your own character, of learning to appreciate what helps you grow. Of learning to reject what drags you back into a brutalized, dehumanized state. Of learning to do what aligns with being a true human being. We can change ourselves. We are malleable. We are works in progress. Didn't I receive it? Well, that's unfortunate. I'll give myself that education. I'll seek to read, to learn from those who lived well, who set examples through their lives, who were extraordinary human beings. And I'll educate myself, according to those values. So, don't lament what you didn't receive. Work so that you can attain what you were not given, and be able to shape yourself, according to that dream, that ideal you nurture. We lack fundamental reference points to guide us toward growth. It's as if I told you, go, go, without saying where to, where from, or how you're going to make the journey. In other words, it's complicated. We need certain guiding markers. Above all, we need to know where we are and where we want to go. And the determination to make that journey. Where do we want to arrive? This is a piece of advice I'll in many lectures. That you have the courage to engage in an exercise of imagination. Philosophy often works through exercises of imagination. Place your awareness on the last day of your life. And imagine the human being you want to be at that moment. Which flaws do you want to have refined? Which virtues do you want to have developed? What do you want to have accomplished? What kind of legacy do you want to have left in the world? In other words, to dream of the human being, the masterpiece of your life. The human being you would like to have built when everything is coming to an end. Remembering is something fundamental. Well, see in the world, above all, to build ourselves, not to build things. Nature doesn't need us to build a single thing. You have spacecraft that fly. Well, nature is full of planets, stars, and comets flying in every direction. You have machines that can even surpass the speed of sound. Nature has the speed of light. It doesn't need you to make things. It already has things. What it needs is for you to make yourself. Because that, it cannot do on its own, precisely because of the law of free will. You must grow through your own choices. So, the only thing nature expects from us is that, Through what we do, through the way we act in the world, we are constantly building ourselves as human beings. So, think about that human ideal, the ideal human being you would have dreamed of meeting, the ideal human being you would dream of becoming. Make that your ideal. Make it your project, your purpose, your meaning in life. When you already know where you want to go, it becomes much easier to find the right path. And when you know who you are, where you are at this moment, that helps too. And so I advise you, be careful with fantasies. Knowing where I'm right now is not about imagining the qualities I think I have, because we often get caught up in illusions. One thing that helps us understand where we are is that biblical phrase, by your works, I will know you. Look at the trail you're leaving behind on your path. If it's a trail of destruction, you can't be a swan, you must be some kind of pachyderm that's destroying everything in its way. If it's a trail of animosity, of antipathy, of sadness, then you might not be such a pleasant person. You're probably not helping others grow because you're leaving them increasingly bitter. So, take a look at the trail you've left behind so far. That's how you come to recognize yourself. Whoever passed through here was a human being with such and such characteristics. Because just look at what they left behind as a trail. So, that gives you a sense of where you are at this moment. When you have these two things, I know where I am and I know where I want to go, then you're able to move forward. That's the equation of identity. If I invite you to visit me at home and you get lost on the way, and you call me asking, how do I get there? The first thing you'll ask you is, where are you? Because you already know where you want to go, my house. But in order for me to help you, I need to know where you are. When you have this equation, knowing where you are and where you want to go, then you're able to move, to grow, to walk in that direction. So, establish your ideal, the best human being you can possibly imagine. Set that as your personal ideal and truly believe that you will, in fact, get there. That it is possible. Believe that this transformation can happen. One of the fundamental elements for us to move from I am to where we want to be is the channeling of will. Determination, willpower, what allows us to keep moving forward, perseverance. The equation of will is a very powerful word. It's tied to strength of will, to that inner capacity to overcome all adversities and to build our dream. Will is built from two things. On the mental level, decision. I want to get there. I have no doubt. This is the goal of my life. There is nothing more valuable than this. In doing so, I benefit others. This is an act of love because the best thing I can do for the people I love is to grow as a human being. This way, I offer them a point of reference. Therefore, reaching this ideal of mine is my life decision, and it will not change. If someone wants to weaken you, the very first thing they will attack is your decision, and they will plant doubt. And wherever you have doubt, you will lose your rhythm, you will lose your direction, you will lose everything. Therefore, the first step to move forward, channeling willpower, is decision on the mental level, and on the physical level, perseverance and consistency. Always walk forward, without haste and without pause, in the direction of your ideal. When you bring these two elements together, it becomes a powerful will, one that can take you where you want to go. Develop this ability, channel your willpower, work with these two elements, decision on the mental plane, and perseverance, consistency, and rhythm on the physical plane. To seek your ideal with every step, that is essential. In other words, let's say I choose justice as my ideal. If I want to have justice as my ideal, it means I must be just starting now. I cannot claim justice as my ideal and continue acting carelessly. With every moment, every step I must strive to embody justice. Now, why? Because if a person is just now, it is certain that they will move toward ever greater justice. If a doctor is performing surgery well right now, it is certain that they will lead the patient toward healing, toward health. Don't believe that ends and means have nothing to do with each other. Ends and means must be aligned with one another. So, it is essential that if justice is your ideal, you bring justice into the present moment. If you have an ideal, you must bring that ideal into the here and now. Strive to live ideal moments, where in each moment you are fully present, body and mind together, as Carl Jung used to say, and giving your best at every step. So, I will become a better human being in the future, but in this moment, I'm giving the best of myself. The sum of many ideal moments will lead me there. When you have an ideal, it's not meant for you to just stare at it, overwhelmed with anxiety. It is a reference point, a direction to keep you from getting lost. But you must look at it while being fully present in the current moment, always giving your best in every moment, with full attention, full dedication, and full heart, leaving your heart imprinted on every step of that staircase. That is how you move closer to your ideal. If you dream of becoming a true human being, you must bring the qualities of a true human being into this very moment, to face what life is asking of you, here and now. And in doing so, you can be certain that you are walking in the right direction. I've mentioned to you in other talks that Pythagoras, in his museum, which was his school of philosophy, he asked his disciples to keep a journal, precisely so they could observe whether, on that day, they had moved toward their ideal, remained stagnant, or gone in the opposite direction. Because if you lose your way for just one day, it's easy to correct. But if you lose your way for several days, it becomes increasingly difficult. So, being fully present in each day of your life is essential. With each step, be fully present, giving your very best. Learn to withstand the pressure of your environment and understand that such pressure will always exist. Every time we make a decision that isn't very conventional, there is the inertial pressure of the environment. Sometimes it comes from people who love us, our family members, our friends, but they often expect us to remain in the inertia of the familiar. Because to many, a familiar hardship is better than the unknown, which might bring uncertainty. This is a philosophy most people live by. So, they don't want you to change, they don't know what you might become. Sometimes, they pressure you to continue following the same patterns. They find it strange when you begin to act consistently with a new way of being. You have to be prepared for that kind of pressure. Any human being who has stepped even slightly outside the crowd and begun to build their own path has felt that pressure. It's important to understand that people are not acting with bad intentions. From their particular point of view, they believe they are helping you. They have their own motivations. Don't argue with anyone, just understand this. But don't let those pressures pull you away from your path. Don't let that pressure make you doubt yourself or influence your direction. I often say that if we spend 5 minutes, just 5 minutes listening to the same conversation, and the person keeps going for 5 minutes, talking to you about the same topic, it's because you're giving them positive reinforcement. Because if you weren't giving them any attention, they wouldn't stay for 5 minutes, they would have given up already. So sometimes, without even realizing it, we're giving positive reinforcement to the very pressures that weigh us down. People persist because they sense that you're open, that you're listening. So they keep insisting, insisting, insisting. But if you are absolutely confident, absolutely focused on who you want to be and what you want to do, those people feel discouraged from continuing to speak. Because they realize their efforts are wasted, that their words are falling on deaf ears, as the saying goes. So, be sure that you are truly grounded, firmly aligned with your purpose and your ideals. Do not be susceptible to these criticisms and external pressures, because if you are, they will never stop. But if you are not susceptible, they will gradually fade away until one day they simply stop. Sublimating our desires, this is something important. Desires are the forces that pull us in all directions, and often they imprison us. Iona. I want to become a better human being, but then I have the desire to do this, the desire to do that. It's important that you begin replacing more base desires with nobler ones, those that elevate rather than lower you. There's nothing wrong if you, I don't know, have a beer every now and then, but not if you trade higher values for that. There's nothing wrong if, from time to time, you eat something that's tasty, but not if you exchange higher things for that. In other words, if I have the opportunity to be just, to be fraternal, to help someone, will I forego doing so because I'll enslaved by a certain vice, by a particular desire that is tyrannizing me? That is slavery. It's about increasingly sublimating those desires, taking their energy and channeling it into higher aspirations, into more elevated purposes. Purposes that are aligned with the values and virtues you wish to cultivate. So, it's about drawing that energy upward. There is only one kind of energy in the human body. If you conserve it at the lower, more coarse levels, you can redirect that energy upward, and it becomes a tremendous, constructive force at higher levels. And it can be done. It's simply a matter of focusing your interest on higher things, and loving higher things, refining your taste, deeply desiring, above any pleasure, a day in which you have been just, a day in which you have been kind. That, for you, must have a flavor superior to anything else. So much so that you would not trade it for anything. The refinement of taste is something fundamental. There was a thinker from the last century, Nila Kantasarihan, who said that evolution is nothing more than the refinement of taste. Learn to appreciate, to love, to make your reference point, things that are increasingly human. And my fulfillment from these things is far greater than what I would feel from more basic things. In this way, you begin to elevate your desires, your vices, your whims, which often keep you bound down here. This doesn't mean that you can't have certain behaviors within a certain framework, as long as there's no excess. That's perfectly fine. But it means you must not become a slave to them. As I said, want to have a beer? Go ahead and have it. But don't become a slave to it, to the point where it keeps you from moving forward, because you feel you always have to be there. Anything that enslaves you is something you should consider letting go of, because you cannot allow yourself to be in that kind of situation. I like chocolate, but if I can't go a single day without eating chocolate, then it's enslaving me. It's a good idea to take some distance from it until I regain self-control. This is a technique, a strategy, to help us not lose control and command over ourselves. Stay connected to your ideal. As we've mentioned at some point, always remember and enrich that vision. If possible, write it down, describe to yourself the kind of human being you want to become. There's a story I always tell, which I find very interesting. Imagine a person inside a house, with all the doors and windows closed. They don't like the sun. One fine day, they decide to make peace with the sun and open the doors and windows. The distance between them and the sun with the doors and windows closed or with them open is exactly the same. But just by being willing to come into contact with the sun, it already begins to illuminate where they are. In other words, if I want to be a human being, good, loving, balanced, with self-control, with fraternity, with empathy, these virtues, simply because I've opened myself to them, already begin to illuminate me where I am. That's why we need to be attentive to this, that is, a part of this ideal is already here with me. I need to make this increasingly clear and vivid in my imagination. The human being I want to become one day is deeply connected to the human being I want to be tomorrow, today, right now. We must constantly nourish that image. If we don't take care of the mind, it will feed on fantasies that drain our strength. This is another way in which desires manifest. Either they drag us into action, or they trap us through fantasy. We don't free ourselves from the desire for things, we simply shift the fulfillment of those desires into the realm of fantasy. Why? Because we haven't learned to love our goal. We haven't learned to love the ideal we've set for ourselves. I still prefer that other possibility of being famous, of having a lot of money, of being recognized. I still prefer that possibility. So even if I pretend that I'm walking this path, I feed fantasies where I'm living out that other possibility. Naturally, all your energy is being drained in the direction of that fantasy. You won't be able to grow. It will remain merely a statement of good intentions. Theoretical. You cannot serve two masters at the same time, isn't that right? Either you serve the fantasy, or you serve the reality you've committed to achieving. And strive to become more and more Fernando Pessoa in that reality, to such an extent that no fantasy is as beautiful as it. No fantasy will bring you as much fulfillment. To be just, noble, and good, that is the most wonderful thing I can achieve. If I become that, one day I will be the happiest man in the world. To love that goal as the most desirable thing in your life. To strive to love what we had is everything that appears on our path, what is necessary, not what we chase after, but what arises along our journey. As something necessary, strive to do it in the best way possible. This is closely related to that school of thought known as Stoicism, where they speak of a more fatal love of fate, the way things present themselves. It's not simply about accepting what life brings. It's about loving the opportunities that life offers. Life knows better than I do how I can train myself to become what I aspire to be. Life knows better than I do which paths I need to walk in order to get there as quickly as possible. So, when something arises in our lives as a necessity, don't question it. But I would prefer something else, would rather be somewhere else. If this is what's necessary at this moment, it's a sign that it's necessary for you and for your growth. Do it in the best way possible. It's like a child who does their homework very well. When that happens, the teacher gives them a new lesson. If the child doesn't do it well, they'll remain stuck there until they manage to overcome that learning. If we don't overcome a certain difficulty, we remain stuck in that place. And we have to repeat it, with different appearances but the same content, until we surpass that stage of the journey. So, face everything that is necessary as something good, and do it in the best way possible. Don't just accept life, love life as it presents itself. That is love. Fatty. Naturally, we are always chasing after our hearts. Wherever we place our hearts, we'll pursue it. Place your heart in this goal of growth that you are striving to achieve. Love that goal and love every step of the process required to reach it. And you'll see that it becomes much easier to walk that path. Following the map of those who came before that is something truly valuable. It's something we call tradition. Those men who were great throughout history, who accomplished remarkable things, good men, men of integrity, who made history because of their character, those men always enjoyed teaching and left behind all kinds of guidance. When you learn from those who have walked this path and managed to move forward, you gain a much greater advantage, because now you're not wandering aimlessly, you have a map. With the map, you have a much higher chance of reaching your goal and not getting lost along the way. So, if we're going to start building an airplane, let's go to the sourceway, study aeronautical engineering, everything that has been gathered through tradition, and we begin from there. Well, start from the 14 bis. If you want to live a truly good human life, there are many people who have achieved a great deal in that regard. Seek to learn from those who came before us, who were examples of a meaningful life, so that you can save time. And to better guide yourself along the path, using this map, which is tradition. The tradition of human beings who worked on themselves to become better human beings. This makes things much easier. To understand adversities is necessary when they help us grow. In other words, every time an adversity arises, to say to it, may I come out the other side better than when I entered. In other words, to try to understand that our sharp edges need certain kinds of sandpaper in order to polish them. And those adversities came precisely for that reason. Sometimes, when we look back, if I were to ask you what made you grow the most in life, what was the experience that helped you grow the most, you will remember an adversity. We have this curious trait as human beings. We tend to learn when we face difficulties. When things go really well, we become so euphoric that we don't learn anything. Difficulties bring reflection and often propel our consciousness to a higher level. So, facing adversities as opportunities to come out on the other side greater than when you entered. By filling our minds with higher goals, we'll gradually detach ourselves from earthly objectives. In other words, I have a dignified life. It doesn't really matter whether I have 2, 3, or 4 houses or multiple cars. I'll lose the need for these things that, in truth, I never truly needed. This artificial need was created by the consumerist pressure of society, a kind of consumerist alienation imposed by it. Little by little, I'll break these ties with the material world. When I'm bound to higher things, that is, I long so deeply for justice, so deeply for fraternity, that I draw energy from these higher aspirations rather than from earthly desires. I begin to free myself from this prison of attachment to the earth. The more I connect with things that are, so to speak, celestial, those that come from the realm of the human ideal, the less I'm bound to the material world. I gradually stop needing the things that most people believe they cannot live without. In other words, I become increasingly free. I continue freeing myself from the ties that bind me to the world. Perhaps you've heard of a tradition Buddhism founded by Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. Its central focus is to liberate humanity from suffering. And in order to free human beings from suffering, he formulated the 4 noble truths. The first, he said, is the recognition of the existence of suffering. The second, he said, is that suffering arises from the fact that everything is transient, everything lacks permanence. All things in the material world pass away, they disappear. This brings about great suffering. The third noble truth, he explains, reveals the cause of suffering. The cause of suffering is our attachment to these things that we are inevitably going to lose. The more attached you are, the more you suffer, because they will inevitably follow their own path and leave. So, when you become attached to goodness, to justice, to fraternity, these things do not go away. They are universal values that will never abandon you. When you detach from material things, it doesn't mean you will stop attending to them, nor does it mean you will stop respecting them. On the contrary, you actually treat them with more love when there is less desire, less craving. But you begin to free yourself from the pain of depending on things that you will inevitably lose. This is part of a tradition Buddhism that speaks clearly about this. A person frees themselves from these ties to shadows, which sooner or later will return to the place from which they came. In other words, they are shadows destined for nothingness, they are fleeting. Therefore, we begin to free ourselves from this suffering. This is very important. To free our memory from burdens. And here is another point I always emphasize, settling accounts with life. That is, last year I made a certain mistake, all right. What did you learn from it? I learned something from it, so close the account. It caused me pain, but it also gave me experience. The account is closed, it's settled, paid. Someone did something to me. Well, it's not my place to judge that person. Life will take care of that. But what they did to me allowed me to grow a lot in how I relate to others, in how I deal with life. So, I lost something, but I gained something else. Close that account too. Keep moving forward, holding on only to the essence of what you lived through, which is the learning. It's very hard to grow while carrying a heavy burden of resentment and guilt. When you're stuck in the past, you can't move forward. In other words, settle your accounts with the past, because you need that lightness to keep progressing. This is a very important element for anyone who wants to grow. Rejoice in every small achievement. Commit to it and identify with it. In other words, think of a mother when her child is learning to walk. When the child takes their first step, the mother celebrates joyfully. She calls the neighbors, bakes a cake to celebrate. In other words, she honors every small gain the child makes. And that is how we should approach our own self-improvement, with love. With care, with love, toward yourself. In other words, even a small step forward, cherish it. Commit to it. Now I'll sustain this right here. Create a bond. With that, commit to it. Commit to keep moving forward. In other words, to commit and to identify with it. From now on, the face I see in the mirror is different. I'm this now. I'm what I have just achieved. And soon I will become something even better by committing and identifying with each small step you take. This is a way for us to feel embraced in our journeys of transformation, because it's not easy. When you achieve even a small victory, celebrate with yourself, toast with yourself, even if it's just that small progress, and identify with it and commit to it. It's important for us to realize that clouds may obscure the sky, but the clouds are one thing and the sky is another. We may have flaws that cloud our personality, but our personality is one thing and the flaws are another. Do not identify yourself with your flaws. Don't say to me, I am a person who's always late, or am an insecure person. No, you are experiencing that. These things are like accessories, just like clouds trying to cover the sky. You are not any of your flaws. The full human condition carries none of these attachments. They are things that have stuck to you throughout life, from the outside. And just as they stuck to you, they can come off one day if that is your will. And if you work toward that, they will come off in such a way that you'll only have a distant memory of them. They will no longer be with me or with you on the path. So never say, I'm a flaw. No, im. But soon, it'll be just a little less so. And then, a little less again. I'll keep moving forward until one day I am completely free of it. I believe in that, and I already see myself on the other side. I already see myself without that flaw. I'll work in that direction. It's important that we hold on to a fundamental idea throughout this process. To grow is to be guided by the greatest of values, the highest of virtues, which is kindness. It is kindness that allows us to grow. From kindness are born all values, all virtues in the world. A person may be a genius, may possess tremendous intellectual capacity. If he is not kind, when he acts, he will be inhumane. And well, see, not to be inhumane, but to become more and more human. To live up to the idea that nature conceived for us to be fully human beings. So, the idea of kindness, of doing good, that is the idea that must always guide us. I want to attain many virtues, but above all, kindness. I look at the world through the lens of kindness. It's something intimate. I feel as though kindness and I are one and the same. It is from kindness that my identity radiates. It is from that foundation that you can truly build yourself as a human being. If a person leaves kindness behind, no matter what abilities they may have, they have become inhumane. People know this. When someone is truly cruel, they say, wow, that doesn't even seem like a human being. We know this deep down. It is kindness that defines us as human beings. Therefore, it is the castellan of our transformation. To seek what Plato called the idea of the good. To always be guided by the intention to bring benefit. To wisely benefit everything that can be benefited along the way. That ought to be benefited along the way. I always recommend something very simple to people, silly, perhaps, but meaningful. Take photos on New Year's Eve. Then, the following year, look at those photos. You know what would be ideal? That you look at them and say, I'm more of the human being I was in that photo. Even if just a little, I've grown. I've smoothed out some rough edges. Am a little better when it comes to living with others, to tolerance, to patience. Am a little better at managing my temper. I'm no longer as emotionally unstable. In short, even if just a little, I've grown. Am more of that human being. It's important that you do this, because a year is not a short amount of time, my friends. We live very few years, very few years. That's our lifespan. 80, 90 years, give or take. A year is a lot to throw away stuck, not moving forward. So, set that as your goal. When I look at these photos next New Year's Eve, I'll no longer be the same person. I will have fought many battles during that time, which isn't so short, to overcome something, to conquer at least that which most crudely holds me back, unlocking those chains and freeing myself from those prisons. That way, you give life a rhythm, you ensure that you're moving forward. It's interesting because sometimes, when we say, he'll let go of situations, of things, we think we'll become cold, but it's quite the opposite. When we have an intense craving for things or people, we're not being loving, we're being possessive, we're being draining. When freedom, for example, to the people we love, we are far more loving than if we force them to remain tied to us. As you avoid creating bonds of possessiveness, bonds of excessive desire, you give freedom to those you love to follow the path that is best for them. And that is an act of love. That is a much deeper kind of love than the love that clings. When we let go, we have a much healthier relationship with all aspects of life than if we wanted to keep everything stuck to us. In other words, we love better when we detach from the material things of the world. We can actually be more helpful even to those very same things. We no longer do everything for our own benefit, for our own desires. We work with the purpose of benefiting the things and the people around us. Therefore, I truly become a benefactor. I love better and I contribute more meaningfully to things when I'm not attached to them. When we change, we offer a great service to the world. We prove that this is possible. So, those people who feel discouraged, who believe that life is already completely predetermined, that it can't be anything other than what it is, when they look at you, they see that change is possible. Look, that person fought for it and today is a completely different human being. It is possible. You've added a new option to humanity's menu of possibilities. That is hope, that is encouragement, that is motivation. For all those who wish to work on their own self-improvement but didn't see it as a possibility, didn't believe it could be done. And now it comes through you. Therefore, it is also an act of love. It is an act of love to serve as a reference point so that people can see a light at the end of the tunnel. To be a reference point for transformation so that people know they too can do this for themselves. To chart a path, to pass on these instructions, in other words, to illuminate the way for those who come after us, an extremely noble act. We have even proven that free will exists and that you chose to build yourself rather than simply building things as society dictates. If you chose this path, it's because that choice is possible. In other words, you are free to make it. You demonstrate that free will exists in nature because you made use of it. And thanks to it, you became who you are. There's a phrase, I don't know who the author is, but it's been circulating widely in society that says, change so much that people have to get to know you all over again. I find that highly desirable. That's exactly how it should be. We should change so much that people would need to get to know us all over again. Wow. He used to be late all the time, now he's the first to arrive. He used to be impatient, now he's the most tolerant of all. He used to be unstable, now he's always calm and balanced. He used to be hot-tempered and now he's incredibly calm. In short, people have to redefine you in their minds because you no longer fit the model they once had of you. That's wonderful. It's a sign that you're making good use of your life. The greatest use of life. To leave this world greater than when we arrived, and to allow, through our example, many others to benefit as well. To help many other beings grow. To leave behind a luminous path that others can follow. Basically, that's what I'd like to share with you. As guidance. On what can be done, on what. Of course, there may be many other forms of guidance. This is what I've been able to gather as tangible elements you can hold on to as you walk your path. Personally, I can say that I never give up on myself under any circumstance. Progress is slow, it's difficult, it truly is. But I don't give up on myself. We must have the will to improve. Fall 1,000 times, rise 1,001, but keep working to become a better human being. That's what it's about. That's why we came here, and that's what life expects from us. I hope these reflections can be encouraging, that they can give you a boost in your effort towards self-transformation into a true human being. A better one, a big embrace.